The opening image of a film can tell the audience a lot. In Tremors' case, the opening image communicates a very important message: isolation. There isn't a house or establishment within sight, so if our heroes get into trouble out here, they're on their own. An important part of screenwriting is character introduction. The first look we get at Val, our hero, what's he doing? Pissing off a cliff. We know right away that he's reckless. Val then approaches his beat-up truck where his friend Earl is asleep in the back.
Hey, Mr. Bassett, this is your wake-up call. Please move your ass.
Val decides to play a prank on Earl, causing him to fall out of the truck. This is the basis of their relationship throughout the entire film. Val is the younger, reckless one. Earl is the older, wiser one. We've learned all of this about the characters with barely any dialogue spoken. And when the dialogue does start, it's trim and to the point, with no fat or filler. For example, the discussion about breakfast. The two argue about whose turn it is to cook. This immediately tells us that these two spend a lot of time together.
No breakfast?
I did it yesterday. It was bologna and beans.
No, it was eggs. I did eggs. Over easy.
The hell you did? Bologna and beans. It's your turn.
And when Earl throws up his hand for paper, rock, scissors, it solidifies that point. These two men spend all of their time together and have done so for a very long time. So we're barely 2 minutes into the film and we know everything we need to know about the two main characters and their relationship. That's economic screenwriting at its finest. And the film continues this masterful writing throughout its 90-minute runtime. The next 5 minutes set up the entire film. We see Val and Earl argue on the drive about which job to take today. This tells us that they live hand to mouth. When they go to see the girl, Val is excited, spouting off his requirements for attractiveness in the female form. This seems like useless filler dialogue, but it's not. What this line of dialogue does is set up Val's character arc.
You will have long blonde hair, big green eyes, world-class breasts, ass that won't quit, and legs that go all the way up.
When he falls for Rhonda at the end of the film, we can see that he has grown from the shallow boy only interested in bar bimbos at the beginning of the film, to a confident man who has fallen in love at the end. Now let's talk about some of the supporting characters. When we first meet Melvin, he's bouncing a ball off of someone's truck. He and the guys exchange insults. We immediately know that Melvin's a little jerk that likes to pester the guys. When we first see Burt Gummer, he's complaining to Walter about the specificity of his ammunition. Take a listen.
Look, these are hollow points, but they're not Hydra-Shock hollow points.
Excuse me, I thought bullets were bullets.
Hi guys, what you been doing?
So what this dialogue tells us about Burt is that he really knows his ammunition. We could even go as far to assume that he's an expert. When we listen further, we learn that this is a man who is self-reliant and skeptical of the government. The kind of guy you want around when something bad happens.
Sorry, time to move. Eminent domain.
Down, honey, down.
Yeah, Bert. The way you worry, you're gonna have a heart attack before you get a chance to survive World War III.
Then we have the foreshadowing of the faulty cooler. This is a well-concealed foreshadow because it makes sense for Walter to bring this to Val and Earl's attention, since they are the resident handymen. So at 8.5 minutes, the story is set up with most of the main characters already introduced. Now it's time to build the tension. Let's take a look. That scene took approximately 1 minute and 10 seconds of screen time and set the tone for what's about to come. So at less than 10 minutes into this film, we already know the main characters and have a feel for the tension and danger that is about to befall them. We as the audience are intrigued and anxious to follow our heroes on this journey. Now you might be thinking, well that's great, but doesn't every film set itself and its characters up within the first 10 minutes? Let's take a look at another creature feature from 1990 to see how it compares. Arachnophobia opens with a photographer meeting a doctor in South America to photograph spiders. This opening goes on for 18 minutes to basically show the photographer getting killed by a spider and his body being shipped back to a small town in America where the story will take place. So with 18 minutes of screen time, Arachnophobia foreshadows a doctor that shows up later in the story, as well as how a dangerous spider gets into a small town where the story takes place. This is terrible screenwriting from an economic standpoint. The film goes on for 20 minutes before we are even introduced to our main character or where the story takes place. Now, why did Arachnophobia decide to use up 18 minutes of screen time to show the origin of the spider instead of letting the audience get to know the characters? Would it have made a difference if we didn't know where the spiders came from? Probably not. We didn't need to know the origin of the graboids to be afraid of them, and that's not by accident. Here's what the writers of Tremors had to say when asked about where the graboids came from.
Look, these creatures are absolutely unprecedented.
Yeah, but where do they come from?
That was a big question, though, where the creatures came from. And people kept asking. I mean,
well, they insisted.
There was a debate about that.
There was a big debate about it early in the process. First of all, we didn't care. And since I'm the one who comes out of science fiction films, I was saying there's only 4 places they can come from. They're either radioactive, or they're a biological experiment, or they're from outer space, where they've always been there. This is the only options you have. So I didn't want to say it. And I said, in fact, I'll go one better. Let's just say all of them.
Doesn't matter where they come from.
Yeah.
It was a no-win situation to answer where they come from, really, for me, because there are only the standard few places. Where can they come from? Radiation, outer space. I mean, we've heard them all. And would you figure out where they come from in the short time the film takes place in, once you discover these creatures? So I thought that it was more reality-based and realistic that they wouldn't figure it out.
Arachnophobia spent too much time explaining the origin of the spiders. Tremors doesn't give us any origin or information on the graboids, and we must learn about them with the characters.
Well, it's got no eyes, right? Sure as hell can't smell us underground. I say it's been listening.
Of course. It senses seismic vibration. It can hear every move we make, especially on this rock. It's a perfect conductor.
That means we're stuck. That pisses me off.
The way that Tremors tells their story is far superior to that of Arachnophobia. The audience doesn't want to be spoon-fed blatant exposition for 20 minutes, and knowing too much about the creature can take away some of its power. As we all know, fear of the unknown is always scarier than knowing what's coming for you. Tremors played this angle brilliantly. We learn little by little about the graboids as we go along. This puts the audience in the same perspective as the characters, and this mystery makes us want to keep watching. Imagine if Tremors would have opened with a similar scene like Arachnophobia, showing someone bringing this thing back from another world. It would have deeply weakened the threat. Likewise, if the movie opened with Edgar and his encounter with the graboid, showing what it is and what it is capable of before meeting our main characters, it too would have weakened the threat, because the audience would already know what's after them before we got to know them. A scene like this at the very beginning of the film would have made it impossible to build the tension they successfully did in the first 10 minutes. In a sense, it's like the old film adage of not revealing the monster too early, if at all. At 20 minutes into the film, the characters are in immediate danger with very limited options, and from there the tension builds and builds. Conflicts arise, conflicts are resolved, only to be met with another immediately after. And that's what makes this movie great. There's never a dull moment. It's a 90-minute edge-of-your-seat genre mashup with facets of action, horror, comedy, and science fiction. And if I could only use one word to describe it, that word would be fun. So is Tremors a perfect movie? My answer has to be yes, because no matter how many times I watch it or analyze it, There's nothing they could have done different to make it better, and that makes it perfect in my book. Tremors is a tightly written, brilliantly paced story with well fleshed out characters. And what's ironic is the fact that Tremors is supposed to be a silly homage to B-movie creature features, but is actually far better than any of the films it pays tribute to. That's my take. Let me know your opinion in the comments down below. Is Tremors the perfect movie? Thanks for watching.